Hi guys, Nicole here from The Little Craft House. So you guys probably know me for doing a lot of polymer clay tutorials. Well, today I was going to do something a little bit different, and I thought I would do a bit of a behind the scenes of me making some resin earrings. So for my other little hobby business that I do, I make lots of different styles of earrings, and resin being one of them. So I thought today I would go behind the scenes with you and show you what I do. Now, things didn't quite go to plan, and unfortunately I didn't capture it all on video, but I had my resin do a flash cure. This isn't something that's ever happened to me before. I have read about it, I've heard about it, and to be honest, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. And so I thought I would just talk you guys through what sort of happened and what to do if it happens to you. So today's resin session started off as normal. I'm mixing up here my casting resin, and it was a 1-to-1 ratio mix. So I'm just mixing it up here, making sure that I'm getting it all well mixed up and trying not to put too many bubbles into the mixture, although I didn't really succeed at that. So when I work with resin, I like to work outside. And as you can see, today it was not an overly hot day. It's actually really beautiful outside, not too hot, not too cold, and not windy at all. So perfect conditions for doing my resin in. So the molds that I used first, I was able to put in lots of glitters and things. Everything was going fine. It was just after this point that I noticed that things started to go wrong. Now, one of the reasons that I think it might have started to overheat was because I was taking my time quite a lot with doing my glitter mixes and choosing the colours that I was going to use. Usually when I'm using resin, I work quite quickly. I get in my little zone and I just work away. But because this time I was filming it for a YouTube tutorial, I was taking a little bit longer than what I normally would. I was trying to make sure that all my angles were correct and that you guys were going to be able to see what I was doing. I also think a major part of where I've gone wrong as well is that I mixed up quite a bit of mixture. So normally when I'm mixing up my resin, I wouldn't do quite as much as what I did today, but I was planning on doing quite a lot of molds, including some dishes as well. So I think the combination of me taking my time and leaving that large amount of resin in the mixing cup not being used for those extra few minutes, I think that all took part in it overheating. Now, as we all know, resin is a chemical. So when you mix your two parts of resin together, it does create a chemical reaction and the resin does warm up normally. Not to the extent that it started to warm up with this though. So here I was just getting some pigment ready, and I actually changed my mind on using this pink pigment to start with, and I decided that I'm just going to pour the clear straight in. Now, whilst I was holding this, I was thinking that the resin felt like it had started to warm up. It was quite warm, but it wasn't overly hot at this point. So I could feel it through the gloves, feel it through the cup through my gloves, and I was noticing that it was feeling warm. So again, I decided to start fiddling around with this a little bit more than what I normally would. I probably should have got the hint that it was warming up and try and speed up a little bit, but I didn't do that. I also made the mistake anyway. This pair is not going to work out. This mold is a matte finish mold, and I put those little pretty sparkly bits in and then the clear, and I was going to, once cured, outline it with maybe like a gold pen or something, but I realized that after I'd poured it that it was going to be a matte finish, so it's not going to have that nice shine. Right, so as I'm holding this cup here, I'm feeling that it is quite warm now. So warmer than what it normally is. I'm adding my little drops of liquid pigment here, and I'm feeling that it is getting quite warm. So my plan was to just quickly do these, the pair of snake earrings here, and then I was going to move on to just doing some of the dishes just to get a big bulk amount of the resin out of that cup. So as I started to apply the resin into the mold here, I was noticing not just the heat coming from it, but it was also getting quite thick and stringy and wasn't moving as well as what it normally would. So normally when I put the resin into this snake mold, it will move itself and fill up the gaps. So at the end where the tail is, it's quite narrow, but usually the resin just runs into there and it's not an issue. This time, I don't know if you can see, but it is getting quite thick. And yeah, it was starting to really affect my hand, not affect my hands, but I could feel that warmth getting really, really quite hot in my hands. So whilst you watch me finish up fiddling around with these snakes, I will talk you through what happened next once I turned the camera off. So this little cup in my hand was getting so hot that I wasn't really able to hold it much longer. So I put it down and felt my main cup. This too was red hot, so hot, and it was sitting on the black plastic tablecloth on my glass top table. So I knew that I needed to instantly cool it down. Luckily, I have quite a few bowls out of water for our dogs, and one of them was an old ice cream container with water in it. So I very quickly grabbed that and moved it to where I was working. In that few seconds, the cup of resin had started to smoke. So it wasn't black smoke or anything, it was just starting to like white smoke coming out from it. I very quickly placed it into the water and started sort of moving it around because I just needed to cool it down, and I was a little worried that it might combust and just be a ball of fire. Luckily that didn't happen, and the cool water was cool enough to cool that resin down. So I was lucky that I had the bowl of water nearby that I was able to put the cup into to instantly cool it down. Usually I have a baking tray like I'm using underneath of these molds. I usually have one to the side which I have my cup of resin on anyway to catch the drips. Today I was a little short on trays and I didn't have that, so it was sitting on the plastic tablecloth, which, just in case you're wondering, it didn't melt. I was able to get it off in time before that happened. So when planning for my future resin pours, I will make sure that I have access to water in case I need it. I do have the hose very handy anyway, and I also have access to a fire blanket, which is just on the inside of our door, as the room at the back is also our laser cutting room. So I do have the fire blanket and the hose handy in case I need either of those. And so if you're wondering what happened to the cup of resin, it actually cured right there and then on the spot as well. So here it is in that bowl of water. Look how gross it is because the dogs have been drinking out of it before I put the cup in, not after. And look at the acrylic pop stick, it actually melted. So that shows how hot that resin actually got, because to melt the pop stick means that it was at a really hot temperature. So that actually really surprised me. So this little tutorial didn't end up quite the way that I was planning. Oh, here's my cups with it all cured after only not even half an hour. So I am curious to find out what's going to happen with those pieces that I was able to put in the mold before it did the flash curing. I'm really hoping that those components that I made are okay, because they were only at that shallow depth, so hopefully they weren't too affected by any of that heat. So yeah, here's my little cup of resin that I'm going to have to now throw away. So it is a waste, but things could have ended up so much worse than what they did. So I'm quite grateful that all I've lost is a couple of cups, a stirring stick, and a few mils of resin. Okay, so it's now the next day, and as predicted, my resin is definitely cured. It didn't need the 24 hours because within half an hour it was pretty much cured. I've left it overnight anyway, and I thought we would just demold it together. I'm quite curious to see if my molds have been wrecked from the heat, and whether the pieces will actually be usable or not. But as I say, they are very firm, but let's just see what's actually happened on the underneath side that I can't see. Okay, so as I mentioned with this one before, I've not got high hopes for it anyway because it is a matte mold, which would look so much better with the shiny side. I might be able to use them that side up. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, let's have a look and see if these ones worked. They sort of did. They've got little air bubbles underneath of them. It's probably from the way that I applied it. Oh, you can see there's air bubbles in there. See those little, you can see the little micro bubbles in there. But the mold's still fine. It was a matte finish mold to start with, so that hasn't affected that. So I'd blame the bubbles underneath each of those circles from the way that I applied it, because I was trying out a different method. But anyway, that was just a nice little experiment anyway. I will pop those aside. I might find a use for them later, but this is the one that I am most curious about, and it's these snakes. So as you can see, it ended up being a little bit messy around the edges because it was just so thick that I couldn't keep it nice and neat. So seems to be separating okay. Oh yeah, so it's actually turned out okay. It doesn't look like there's any little micro bubbles in there or anything. I think it looks like it'll be okay. And the mold definitely looks the same as it was when I started using it. It's a bit rough. It's one that I made myself. And all those little bits of spill, that's fine because I can go around with a little knife and cut off any of those little extra bits. But so that actually worked out okay. So I'm quite happy with that. It means that at least that wasn't wasted. So that was definitely an experience for me that I haven't had before. I've been doing resin on and off now sort of for about 5 years, and yeah, that was the first time it's ever happened. So if it ever does happen again now, I kind of know what's going on. I've got a plan now too. So I have learned a few important things, and those things are just being to not mix up too much of the resin mixture, to make sure that I don't let it overheat, so definitely not doing it on a hot day, to have something on standby for in case it does happen, so to have it on a metal tray, to have that cool bowl of water nearby. I know where my fire blanket is and I know where the hose is. So they are also very important. Also making sure that I do it outside just because of the whole chemical reaction. I'm so glad that I don't do resin in the house. Not that I ever would because it's chemicals anyway, but just that extra, I don't know if it was any more toxic being smoking, but at least I'm not risking that in my house. So yeah, that was an experience, and I'm just really hoping that it doesn't happen again, but I have learned a few things from it, and yeah, quite an experience. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed coming along with my little resin fail today, and hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but if it does, then you're a bit more prepared than what I was. So thanks for joining me, and I'll be back next week with a normal tutorial.